Welcome to Reigniting Small Business. I am Patrick Lee, CEO of the Spark Business Institute, and I am very excited to welcome back Ashlee Berghoff, systems strategist and the founder of A Squared Online, and the newly minted author of Eureka Results: How Entrepreneurs Can Turn Their Best Ideas into Reality. So welcome, Ashlee.
I'm so glad to be here, Patrick. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to have this conversation with you. I always love it.
Absolutely. Let's just start out real quick by you giving us a little background on A Squared Online for those of the audience who did not tune in the last time you were with us.
Yes. So A Squared's mission really is to help entrepreneurs experience the freedom they started their business to experience. So we really believe in the power of systems, and delegation is the greatest tools for achieving entrepreneurial freedom. And so we work with our clients to learn how to use those, build those into their businesses, and especially make that freelancer to CEO transition, which is so hard for so many people.
Yeah. Yep. And this book, the Eureka Results, this is the process of how entrepreneurs can take an idea and make it a reality. Mm-hmm. So you were kind of doing that in the writing of the book. So what was the process of writing this book like for you?
Yeah. So I thankfully signed up for a program. So I had some external support in the process. And it was very, very structured over 10 months. And I really appreciated how they broke that process down, where we had 3 or 4 months of writing, and they would tell us every week, this is who you need to be talking to. This is how much you need to be writing, those sorts of things, and a period of time for revisions and a period of time for copy editing and proofreading. And they were walking us through all of the steps. Because if I had my own way with it, I probably would still be working on it for the next several years. I would just keep tinkering and want to add things and change things. And at a certain point, it would probably have gotten worse, not better, with all of that. And so I really appreciated that they showed us what it looks like to move forward in a really straightforward way, and then just press play, get it out in the world.
And I think that is the challenge to any artist of any sort. Mm-hmm. Is when you're being an artist, you want perfection, and it never quite seems to get there. So I know a lot of folks who have worked a project to where at some point they would have been happy with it, but they kept going, and now it's died somewhere because they will never bring it out again, right?
Right.
But you did not get trapped in that. In fact, you have, I think, a bunch of material for your sequel. Right?
Probably, but it'll be a while before I'm ready to
even think about that. Right?
Yeah, but it really is, it was helpful to see it as just the start of a conversation rather than the entirety of my thoughts on a topic. It's just...
Yeah. So one of the things I thought was interesting, and I got to participate a little bit in this, was you managed to build yourself sort of a supportive team out there that was helping you look at ideas and tell you how things read and all that sort of stuff. And I think most folks who are getting ready to sort of write a book don't think that way. They think they go off in their little cave and they start writing the book. So, right. How did that work for you, and was it beneficial?
It was by far the most powerful part of the process for me, both in the creation of the book as it is, and also just the stamina to make it. Because I really didn't expect how vulnerable it would feel to publish something like this in real life. And so to have had people throughout the entire process share their stories with me, share their thoughts, their perspectives, to shape the concepts of the books, and then actually read the book and share their honest thoughts about, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, this is really powerful and resonating with me, this doesn't. And so the book as it is today would be infinitely less helpful, both for me and for the readers, if it hadn't have had that input from all these people who are so generous to be part of that with me, and to let me know that they were on my team and that they believed in what I was trying to do. Going off in a cave somewhere, creating something and bringing it back out into the world is, I can't imagine doing that. I think it would be so much harder and scarier.
And lonely.
And much more lonely.
Yeah. So having all that input, did that create any dramatic changes in what you set out to write initially, or was it just more like fine tuning?
Yeah, at least for me, it completely changed the main point of the book. So my original idea was how to navigate the phase that we're working with a lot of clients in, which is this one person solopreneur phase to building a team and navigating that messy middle between the two of learning how to build a more stable company. But in talking with so many people, what I realized was that what I had identified was the messy middle was very different for every person I talked to. For some people, the messy middle was much sooner. For many people, the messy middle was much later. For most of them, they were in it, right? I didn't talk to a single entrepreneur who was like, oh, yes, the messy middle was behind me. Everything is stable and perfect now, and I have learned everything I need to know. That just wasn't the case. Even with one of the people I interviewed who has since sold his business after 30 years, he's doing the next thing. He's learning something else. He's leaning into a new challenge, right? And so even then, even what we would see as the end, the success point of a business, successfully selling it, he's on to the next messy middle. And so I changed the entire tenor of the book away from here's the messy middle, how to navigate it, towards we're all in the messy middle. How do we live in this world and how do we make our best ideas happen in this world? And now it's very much focused on using systems as the tool to do that.
And so I'm guessing that you sort of had in your mind an initial audience, then you had the look of that audience. Here's who's going to read this book and here's what they look like. I'm guessing that maybe that audience has expanded a bit for you now, that it'll fit to other audiences.
Yeah, very much so. And it was interesting because there's always that balancing act of still being clear and specific about who it's most aligned to. And so I wrote it mainly for entrepreneurs. The stories are of entrepreneurs. So that's in the title, right? How entrepreneurs can turn their best ideas into reality. But it's been really fun to see people like friends of mine or friends of the family who bought the book just to support me, to be nice, and then actually read it and found it incredibly applicable for their scenarios. A couple people who come to mind were a high school teacher who's been doing that work for decades now and is pretty fine-tuned in his own systems, but learned something about how to do that more. And a college professor who's about to start a new department within her field. And so even outside of that space, most of us have not been trained to think about the systems around us and how to use those. And so it's been really cool to see it apply in other completely different settings I didn't expect.
And if you think about it, that makes perfect sense. I mean, we are either surrounded by already existing systems that we have to navigate, right? Or we are lacking in a system and we're aware of it, right? Because it's causing us pain.
Right.
So it seems totally applicable to me that it would move all over the place, including, not even career-based, like how you handle your household, or anything like that. So should folks trying to handle the household read your book, Ashlee?
Yes. 100%.
100%.
I use all of these ideas with raising kids and figuring out how to balance my work around the life that we want to have and the priorities that we have. Yeah, everything. Yeah. Systems are just incredibly powerful. And when we know how to see them, identify them and change them, we can really do a lot in a lot of different areas.
So what specific learning did you take away from the writing of the book?
That's a great question. I think for me, I expected that the process would be really helpful in teaching me how to articulate what I already believed about the topic. What I was really surprised by is it also helped me deepen my own understanding of what it was and why it mattered. And so for me, I think about systems very differently now than I did when I started writing the book about systems, just in terms of how powerful and beautiful they can be, how we can learn how to use them and think about them as a concept, and being willing to kind of plant my flag there and say, this is the thing that I think I can do to help people, because I'm a total nerd and I like this stuff. So just deepening my own understanding and not just articulating it, but changing my own mind.
So, all right. So you use the word beautiful. So
Mhm.
I'm going to challenge you here a little bit because you know my temperament. So
Mhm.
I have the temperament of the type who runs away from structure and systems. That's just
Mhm.
who I am. But I'm also
Mhm.
working with clients constantly where what I'm telling them, do as I say, not as I do, right? I'm telling them we need systems here. We're going to have to build
Mhm.
standard operating procedures. We need to make this make sense. Okay.
Mhm.
So talk to me and convince me that systems can be beautiful because I'm not sure I believe you.
You are not alone. My father is in the same camp. He 100% loves the book, and he's still like, I know, I just don't want to like it. Um, my my biggest demonstration, I think, of systems being beautiful is the systems inherent in nature, right? If you think about honeycombs or root systems or the Everglades or these other things, ecosystems in their, perfect balance as they're supposed to work are incredibly beautiful and some of the most beautiful things in our world, right? Or even man-made systems, the Golden Gate Bridge, some of the most beautiful buildings you may have ever seen, right? When our ideas take shape in the real world, that's when we can actually experience the benefit of them, right? And we need systems to make that happen. And so for creators and creatives who have these incredible ideas and can think about possibility and just these big picture concepts and all of that, we need those ideas in the real world, right? And when those ideas become real, that's when all of us can experience them, right? Beyond the realm of idea and now in the realm of reality. So inside a business, it's always a little tricky because in nature, you can sometimes see the beauty of those systems. When systems work inside a business, they become invisible. So for many people, they have plenty of working systems around them without even realizing it. And so all they see are the ones that are broken. And it's usually complex and messy and is not an easy fix, right? And so it becomes heavy, weighty, and complicated and ugly. But when you can kind of see the systems that are working, it's like, wow, we live 2,000 miles apart and we're having this conversation right now. That's really cool, right? There's a system that works, right? That's something
Sometimes.
that didn't exist before. Yeah.
um, okay. So that makes sense to me. So when I think about that, I also think about um, in the implementation of systems, because you're talking about the entrepreneur, right? So
Mhm.
speaking to the entrepreneur, but one of the things that I've learned probably the hard way is that things that I am not necessarily good at or I'm not drawn to um, tend to crop up and get in my way all the time. And me
Mhm.
thinking I'm going to change myself or just power through doesn't always work.
Right.
So going back to your concept of you wrote the book with a team, not in a cave,
Mhm.
as that entrepreneur who avoids systems myself, the idea that I need to put together a team and allow that team to potentially build or operate systems around me, uh,
Mhm.
it, that strikes me as incredibly important. This isn't we're
Mhm.
going to change the entrepreneur, they're going to read it and completely relearn how to behave. They're
Right.
going to recognize the importance and necessity of this and how it can help them, and then
Mhm.
figure out their workaround if they're not capable of doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's where we all need each other, right? Because I'm very logical, very straightforward. The realm of big ideas is scary to me. So I'm not your normal entrepreneur at all. Right. So entrepreneurs need people like me in the world, but I also need people like that in my life because otherwise I think way too small. And so we do need people around us, even if we're in a solo business, right? We can find contractors or coaches who think differently, see differently, and can help us navigate that space.
Yeah. So it makes me think this way. So you founded A Squared. You worked with businesses to help them set up systems, figure out their workflows, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that in your mind, you were taking what you knew within that A Squared process and putting it into a book.
Mm-hmm.
Does this book actually reflect what you do at A Squared, or is it something that's gone a little bit beyond that?
That's a really great question. We definitely included in the book a lot of the things that we do with our clients in terms of this is how we think about team collaboration, and this is how we think about identifying, capturing, and redesigning an operational system within a business. It's broader in the sense that we wanted it to apply to a wide variety of circumstances where when we're working with a specific business, we're really looking at, okay, this is the problem in this specific spot, and this is a specific fix we're going to bring. But I wanted it to be kind of just even an introduction to thinking this way for entrepreneurs who might not be used to thinking this way. And it does go a lot more into the mindset of that and some of the things I've had to learn the hard way in that space, in just terms of building the stamina and the sense of encouragement instead of shame that can crop up in these spaces when we start talking about ideas people have that they haven't made action on, and now they feel a lot of shame, so we dig into that more in the book than I often will do just on a very practical call with someone,
Right.
So it is different in some ways.
Okay. That makes sense. Our listeners out there are some out there who they've got a big idea, big project, they want to be entrepreneurial, and they want to sort of tackle this. Outside of giving them the obvious answer of, well, pick up the book and read it. But what sort of advice would you give to folks who are either timid or outright terrified of the idea of mapping systems around their idea?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest piece of advice I could give is to kind of set aside some of our preconceptions of what a good system looks like, and really just bring it back to the core level of what it is, which is being intentional about how you do what you do. Like at its core, that's what a system is. And so it does not have to look like a process and procedure manual. It does not have to look like a spreadsheet. It does not have to look like all the stuff that I create within my business because I love this stuff and I do it for fun, right? It's really just saying, okay, this is where I want to go. I want to be intentional about how I want to get there. So what might that look like? And kind of breaking it down from there. Because I think sometimes we can get stuck in the idea of like, oh, this needs to turn into a process map or else it's not a good system, right? And those can be useful and helpful, but there are so many other ways to go about it, and it doesn't have to look organized from the outside. It can really be honestly understanding this is where I want to go and kind of starting to say, all right, here's the first step I can take to get here. Here's the next step. And let me kind of articulate that and get that outside of my head.
So that does pose a little bit of danger, though, and when you're talking to somebody like myself, because I quickly can turn the needed structure of a system into an idea thing. Because when you just gave me permission to idea systems, oh well, if all we're going to do is talk about how it could work and what it might look like, I'm all in. But when I have to sit down and go, okay, wait a minute, let's truly get from point A to point G, right? I start rapidly losing interest. So that what you just said intrigues me, because I think it's both positive but also a danger. Because at some point, I do think it has to become, I don't want to make bad words, like you said, you don't want to make it ugly. But at some point, it does really have to become a system, not a concept.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point and kind of counterbalance to it to say, these things need to be very practical and tangible, right? In terms of what is my next step really? Because really in a lot of ways, like an idea becoming reality, your brain's going to put up a lot of resistance to that because ideas are unblemished. They're perfect. They're unlimited. They're amazing, right? They can be as big as you want them to be. When they start crash landing into the dirt of real life, some of that goes away. All of a sudden, things got harder. There were limitations. Things didn't work the way you thought. It doesn't look quite the way you had it in your head, right? And so all these things can happen to be like, let's go back to the idea phase. That was the fun part, right? Let's just talk about how this could become. And so anytime you're kind of doing something with intention, it really is, it has to be, okay, is this an action I could take or someone else could take? And if it's not there, we're still in idea land. We need to get into reality land. Like, am I sending this email that says this thing? Or am I making a decision about this thing? Or am I making this kind of promise on my website, right? What specific things are happening that other people can see? And if I'm not there yet, then I need to at least take one piece at a time and bring it into the world of reality, even though reality isn't perfect. It's messy. It's not going to be as pretty. And it's not going to have that shine to it.
Yeah. My piece of advice to listeners is to go pick up your book and read it. But I'm going to ask you, if you were to speak to a either first-time entrepreneur or wannabe entrepreneur, what's your big piece of advice that you'd want to give them?
So at a broad level, the biggest thing I suggest always to entrepreneurs, especially if they're starting new, is to say the first system by far that you should focus on is your time leadership, how you respond to your own time. This is not something that most of us were ever taught. And most of us also learned a level of helplessness when it came to our time from being a kid and having parents telling us what to do, and then having teachers telling us what to do, and then having professors telling us what to do, and then having bosses tell us what to do, right? So a lot of times when you become an entrepreneur, you have no idea actually how to lead yourself when it comes to your time. And that can be one of the biggest, hardest, most important, and most impactful areas to learn. So that's always where I suggest to start. You can learn some of the other systems later, but those can sometimes become a distraction. I know when I first started my business, I was trying to really master GDPR compliance, which is a compliance law around email lists in Europe. Not important. Huge distraction. Huge distraction.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to worry about the best software systems right now. You don't need to worry about, a perfect streamlined customer experience right away. Like, you're going to be doing some experimentation when it comes to that stuff. What you need to know is how do I spend my time, and how do I do that in a way that gets me where I want to go?
Okay. Well said. Thank you. All right. Well, Ashlee, thank you for joining us again. I am once again going to hold up the book and say to everybody, go ahead, go out there, buy yourselves a copy. And good luck with systems. That's what I'll say. But appreciate you being here, Ashlee. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next week with another podcast, Reigniting Small Business, and we hope you'll join us then. And until then, bye and have a good time, I guess. Have a good weekend. Have a good whatever. Thank you, Ashlee.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
All right. Bye-bye.